Yeah. Hello again, and welcome to another session of the 18th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Virtual Conference. I'm Bob Ailes. I'm your moderator. Don't forget, this year we're sponsored by the Journal of Educators Online, JEO. Go to thejeo.com. You can see a zillion, almost a zillion refereed articles. There's bound to be some of interest to you. Uh, so give it a try. We have with us James Moore, who's the Director of Online Learning for DePaul University's College of Business and Associate Director of the DePaul AI Institute. It's new, isn't it?
It is. We started last year.
Okay, great. That sounds like it'd be really fun.
It is.
He teaches internet marketing, artificial intelligence classes in the HighFlex format. We are fortunate to have him here today to do a session, as you see in the slide, from chalk to chatbots. So, James, let me hand it over to you.
Cool. Thank you so much. My name is James Moore. It is Friday the 13th, and I very deliberately chose today as a day to present. The irony is, I have never seen any of the Friday the 13th movies. Um, I'm presenting from a room at DePaul. At the moment, because of the way I'm sharing my screen in Keynote, I can't see any of you. So if anyone's waving to get my attention, uh, please jump in with a question at any point. Bob will also be looking at chat just to see if the question's bubbling up, but realize I can't see subliminal information at the moment. So we have about 45 minutes together. I'm going to move through content fairly quickly today. The materials I have are available online. So the QR code will take you to a website where the PDF for today's presentation is. And then what I'm going to try and do is use AI to craft a detailed summary later today. So anyway, this is the plan. So just a quick sort of reaffirm the introductions. My contact information is on screen, so please feel free to reach out at any point. If you're wondering where the wacky accent comes from, I am from the UK. Bath and London are my two hometowns, but I've been living in Chicago for about 26 and a half years. I'm
Well,
part of a community.
I thought it was just a weird East End Chicago accent.
No, no. But anyway, if you visit Chicago, you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of seeing my face spitting on tourists and small children in Millennium Park. As Bob mentioned, I'm director of online learning, but I teach too. So teaching, I think, is the best way to learn. So I'm focusing mainly on AI and generative AI classes at the moment. And the thing that I'm trying to imbue within the minds of my students is to become a sommelier for AI. The reason I think this is critical to success is if you think about a regular sommelier in a restaurant, they do three things. They can show the provenance of a wine, they can talk about how to pair that wine with food to make your experience incredible. And they're aware of price, so they can find the right price point for you. So the thing that I want my students to be able to do is to understand the provenance of particular forms of AI because they're not commodities. They're not the same. Understanding the provenance is important. And then knowing how to pair it with an appropriate task is very important. Sometimes AI is not the right thing to use, but if it is, knowing the right AI is very important. And then the last is price, knowing the cost to you in terms of using these systems. So anyway, that's what I want to imbue them with. So let's move through the material for today. We're talking about generative AI. And AI is an umbrella term. It covers a multitude of different technologies and applications. So there's different forms. We're mostly going to be focusing on generative AI today. If you're unsure as to what that means, generative AI is a form of artificial intelligence where new data resembles the training data. And this can take place in the way of text, images, music, video, and more. There are other forms of artificial intelligence. So one would be predictive AI. This is more deterministic. This is something that analyzes patterns in data and predicts future outcomes or trends. So there's different forms, but a lot of this sort of results through the use of a thing called machine learning. So again, within this umbrella term, machine learning is a way that we can sort of analyze data and use it to train systems in various ways. All this leads ultimately to a particular type of model that you want to be aware of. So there is a multitude, a plethora of forms of artificial intelligence that are available to you. But the ones that are the top of that pyramid are ones that are called foundation and frontier. And those are the things that we want to use. Frontier is basically the cutting edge, the thing that's able to do things better than other models of the past. And foundation are models that surface downstream in other applications. So an example of this is GPT is OpenAI's model, but it surfaces in things like Microsoft Copilot or Microsoft Word, shows up in other systems. So ultimately, as we work with those models, we want to, move towards the frontier and the foundation ones because those are going to be most pertinent to teaching and learning. But there's a danger with that. This is not news to you. I'm sure you're aware of this, but these generative AI systems hallucinate. So here's an example from history. If you were to go to Google and say, I have a problem, the cheese is not sticking to my pizza, the AI overview might come up with a suggestion to fix that problem. And this is a famous example that surfaced in Reddit where Google suggests putting non-toxic glue in your pizza mix to allow the cheese to stick to your pizza. So obviously, this is not a good thing. This is an example of hallucinations. Technically, they surface in sort of two areas: closed content, sorry, closed domain, which is getting something wrong, and then open domain, which is making something up, something that doesn't exist. So as educators, as people working with students, we want to reduce hallucinations as much as possible. So there are techniques to do this. One is to use the more advanced models. Mostly, they are less likely to hallucinate. Or you look for ways to put more data in working memory. So sometimes this could be browsing the internet and using that information within your query, or grounding through a technique called retrieval augmented generation, otherwise known as RAG, or putting more information in the context window. Or it could be self-consistency, which is where you generate multiple response from the generative AI and look for the consistency from those results. Historically, there was a process called chain of thought prompting, where we asked the large language models to think step by step. This is something now that is part of advanced models. They do this in the background, behind the scenes. They break things up into sort of component steps. And then lastly, spending more time or consuming more tokens to process during inference when they're answering your question is more likely to reduce hallucinations. So again, more modern models will do this on your behalf. So let's think about the right pairing, the right system for most educators to use. So my initial suggestion to anyone who's teaching or researching would be to use a product called Notebook LM. This is a service that Google launched, and it's freemium. It's available free of charge to use. So here's an example use case of this. I was presenting to a group called the Broadway League about a year ago. I was not aware of what they did or how they operated, so I had to get up to speed quickly. So the way that I did this was I scraped their entire website to a PDF, gave me a document that was about 3,071 pages long. This I uploaded to Notebook LM. And what we're doing here is this is a system that grounds results. It's using a large language model to create responses to our questions. And instead of using its codex of information that it's gained from the internet, which may have incorrect information, it answers exclusively from the document that I uploaded. So again, this process is called grounding. It's using a technique called RAG. And this is, I think, one of the most important tools that an educator can use because it reduces hallucinations. The system will not answer if it doesn't have the data within its system. So here's a prosaic way that I could use it. I could say, is breakfast served at this event? And it will look through and it will give me an answer that's based upon the data there. I can also use this to create a podcast. So this is a way that we can apply multimodal learning. So it's taken this information and it's going to turn it into something that's equivalent to an NPR discussion with two hosts. It takes that information, turns it into another way that we consume it. So I'll play a little snippet of this briefly.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be talking about something that is near and dear to my heart, Broadway. But we're not just talking about the shows or the performers.
So this is a great way to learn additional information. It could be that many of your students reading text is something that doesn't appeal to them, but being able to listen to a podcast in the gym or on the way to college or school has a lot more sort of appeal. So that's good. But again, here's the other way that you can use this tool more constructively. So here I can put in a prompt like the one that I have on screen saying, I'm going to be presenting at this event. This is the audience. I'm thinking about doing something along these lines. What do you think the audience would most want? So it's giving me the ability sort of to tailor my content for an audience that's grounded in the data. It has additional features. So you can use this to create a multitude of things. But the things that I think are most useful to educators is to create an interactive Q&A and to create mind maps or summaries of the content. It also provides citations. So when you ask a question, the results have citations to indicate where in your documents those results came from. So this is pretty cool. And then lastly, it has multi-document synthesis. So you can upload a multitude of documents and the system can query across them. So here's another way I use this. This is a class that I was teaching earlier this year. Basically, it's an introduction to artificial intelligence and thinking technologies. So I can upload all of my PowerPoint presentations, all of my handouts, all of my case studies, all of my readings to the system. And then I can search across that. So it could be I am looking for information in my material that talks about retrieval augmented generation. So finding the readings there. And here's the response. It comes up with information about this, and it has citations that demonstrates where in those materials this came from. So this is a useful tool for educators as they prepare material, or it could be something that you provide to your students. So the interface here is very well designed. You can select or unselect your sources. You can choose from what you want to query across. You can put in a basic prompt and you can take that content and you can copy it somewhere else. So like I say, I think it's one of the most useful tools and it's freemium, free of charge for basic use. So this would be my suggestion to all. It has some limitations, although I think they are minimal. There's a limit to the number of characters that you can put into a prompt, about 700 characters. There's a limit to the responses that you get from the system. So typically no more than 5,000 words. You can only upload 50 documents for the free version. If you're paying more, I think you can upload about 200 documents. And it has a 500,000 word limit per source, optimized for text. But these to me are not sort of particularly bad limitations. So let's move on, thinking about how to integrate AI into your teaching and learning. From my perspective, there are currently three models in our ecosystem. We have the general purpose models. These were the things that we saw maybe sort of 3 years ago. They're older, they're simpler, they respond to sort of very explicit instructions. And then we have the reasoning models. These came out last year. These are perhaps misidentified by being called reasoning models. They don't, strictly speaking, reason. But what they do is they spend more time processing before they provide results. They'll break prompts into component parts to work out a structural way to respond to a query. And they generate lots of tokens as they create a response. So these are better models to use typically. And then we have agentic AI. So this is very interesting. This is a way that these systems work independently after prompting. So sometimes you can ask it to do something and the system will go away for 5 or 30 minutes before it responds to you with something that it thinks is the result that will be useful to you. So here are simple ways that we can start to use them. One of them might be to sort of create syllabus statements, ways in which you might be using AI in your teaching. So here is something that I've borrowed from. Dan Fitzpatrick is known as the AI educator, and he came up with a prompt called prepare. So basically, this is a structured algorithm for writing a prompt that's more likely to give you good results. So I won't read off what's on screen at the moment. This is in the handouts. This is something that you can look through at your leisure. But what you can do here is you can take this sort of prompting algorithm and then start to populate it with content that's going to be useful to you. So here on screen is an example of this. We're taking the structure, then we're creating lines to go with each of those elements as part of the algorithm. And then we can turn that into a prompt that we use for the system. The genius part here is this results in the AI asking you for clarifying questions before it responds to you. And it uses a couple of hacks there to make it more likely that you're going to get good results. It's asking to sort of rate the quality of the response that it gives to you. So this is a good sort of structure to use from. An alternative one might be create. This is from Dave Burse. Similar thing. We've got an algorithm here. We've got a structure, a framework that we can borrow from as we create prompts. So again, on screen, something that you can use. But then we can start to leverage this further. So one of the ways that I use this on a regular basis is I use the large language models to create quizzes that I'm going to use with my students. So at DePaul, we use D2L Brightspace. So it has a quiz question converter. So basically, if I give structured input to the system, it's going to import that as a series of quizzes. So what I typically do is I record my classes. I have a transcript from Zoom. I use a prompting structure to create quiz questions. And then I have something that I can use with my students. Another approach for this is to use this to create Kahoot questions. So on screen, there are 2 slides that show this prompt. So basically, I'm doing the same thing here. I'm taking the recording of my class and I am adding this prompt before that recording. So basically, I'm telling the system to create a series of structured questions for Kahoot. I'm making sure that there is no order in the response for these questions that may give a clue to students. And this is something that I use in my teaching on a regular basis. I start each class with a 5-minute Kahoot quiz and use a leaderboard to see how the students are responding to this. But again, we can take this to the next level. Deep research is an agentic element to how large language models operate. What deep research does is it takes your query and then it goes out and it looks on the internet for resources that will be useful to answer that question, and then provides you a response that has citations. At the moment, there are sort of 3 products that do this quite well. ChatGPT has deep research, Gemini has deep research, Perplexity has deep research. You may be using one of these platforms already and may have preferences. At the moment, I think ChatGPT has the better deep research product. More detailed responses, better citations, but the other 2, I think, are decent. Here, what I'm going to do over the next couple of slides is just share a template with you. With agentic AI, with deep research, the quality of your prompt basically makes a substantial difference to the results that you get. So where you may be used to working with a chatbot and sort of, putting in sort of loosely worded questions, here's something with more structure is important. So this is a template that you can apply in this area here. So as I say, on screen, I have the structure here. So this is in the handouts for you to use after today. But essentially, we've got an instruction. We're telling the system what to do. We're providing background and context as to why this thing is important, a description of what we're trying to do, a value proposition. We're putting in scope and assumptions, so basically boundaries for the research. And then lastly, my apologies, a little bit hard to read, but I'm making sure that my response has a particular structure. So if there are citations, I want them to look a particular way. If there's an academic tone that I want, I'm applying this here as part of these closing instructions. So these things will give me better results, all things being equal. And if you really want to get the best possible results, you're asking your question using a language called Markdown. So Markdown is basically a structured markup language, similar to HTML. It's basically ways that we can signify semantic information. If we use this structure, we reduce the likelihood that the large language model gets confused by our queries. We're identifying in particular what the parts of a question are. We're providing that semantic structure. It takes a little bit more time to do this, but this is going to give you better results. But here's the thing that I'm most excited about. So agents and agentic AI is the way that these systems become more autonomous. So here's some ways that we can use this personally for our teaching and research, or ways to get our students to understand what is possible. So I'm going to start off with one tool called Manus. Manus comes from the Latin for hand, and it was a system developed by a company called Butterfly Effect. About 2 months ago, they were acquired by Meta, so what was formerly known as Facebook. They still exist, and I anticipate that this product's going to be around as it is for a couple of months, but it may be at some point it gets more fully absorbed into sort of the Meta ecosystem. But essentially, this is an AI agent that lives on top of Claude, Anthropic's large language model, and allows you to do some very, very interesting things. If we were to simplify what an agent is, essentially it's a loop. You're giving it a condition, a request, something to do, and it's going to iterate through a series of questions that is essentially, am I done yet? Have I achieved the result that my user wants me to do? So the loop that this system goes through is it's going to take your request, it's going to try and understand it, is then going to choose tools that'll be useful to respond to your query. So these might be web browsers, these might be PowerPoint, this might be Word, but basically it's choosing the tools that are appropriate to achieve your desired result. It's then going to run a process in a virtual machine, and from here on it iterates. It's reevaluating its results until it thinks it's achieved what you want. And then it's going to present those to you, giving you an opportunity to refine them. And then it's going to wait for the next thing that you want to do. So this might sound kind of esoteric. So let me give you sort of a more sort of concrete example of this. Here's my prompt. I'm saying, can you find me courses at DePaul University that are focused on artificial intelligence? So at the moment, this looks similar to a query that we might do on Google. And if we were to do it on Google, we're going to get a series of search engine results that may or may be useful to us. This is slightly different. The system now starts to run on a virtual machine, a version of Linux, where it's trying to understand the question, and then it's going out onto the web, and it's looking for context, it's looking for information, and it sort of starts to sort of assemble the data that's going to be useful to you. And this system provides us a window on this. We can view what it's doing. It's almost like watching the way that it's thinking. And then when it's done, it's going to give us results. So in this particular case, it creates a micro website that answers the question here. So on this screen, I've got a link to where this exists on Manus. So rather than creating a search engine results page, this is giving us a micro website that responds to this, fairly sort of prosaic query. So let's take this to another level. So again, the same system here, Manus. In this case, I've got a prompt where I'm saying, imagine you're an instructor, a professor of artificial intelligence and internet marketing, I want you now to create a series of PowerPoint slides for a presentation that I can download. So again, the system sort of selects appropriate tools, it does some research, and it creates some PowerPoint slides that you can download. So this, I think, is a good example to get students to understand what's possible because they start to play around, they start to see things. The PowerPoint presentations, I'll be honest, aren't amazing, but this is sort of a very sort of useful demonstration of what's possible. So if this is resonating with you, there's a QR code that provides a link to Manus here to create an account. But let's take this concept and make it more useful. The deficiency that you've probably seen with large language models and using them in your teaching and your research is essentially you're copying and pasting. You're putting in a query, you get some results, you copy and paste it, you put it into something else, you manipulate it. That's not necessarily an efficient way of doing things. So here's how we can change that. Claude Code is an agentic system that's been around for about a year. It's typically not sort of used by educators because it looks scary to begin with. It exists within what's called the command line or the terminal. So you're typing commands and you're receiving results, but you're using an interface that isn't necessarily where most people feel comfortable today. Although if you've been teaching for 30 or 40 years, it might remind you of sort of the early days of working with computers. So installing this is again, a little bit scary. You're going into this command line environment, you're putting in a command to install this, and then it has Claude running on your machine. But here's the paradigm shift. This is the prompt that I'm going to ask the system to respond to. And rather than creating something that I copy and paste, this is directly creating files on my machine. I'm giving it a folder and it's going to create a website on my device. I'm not copy and pasting, I'm not downloading, I'm giving it access to my device. So again, this interface initially might look a little bit scary. It's the command line. You're doing things that feel a little bit strange, a little bit cumbersome, but the end result here is a website. So again, if you're interested, you can use the link that's on this page and the handouts to follow this. So this is a live website. This is something I launched on my website, DePaul. And what it does here is it has an explanation of how Claude Code works over several pages. And it's interactive. There are elements that we can put in content and it will create a syllabus statement or things that we can use in our teaching. This is something that I could not do easily. I could not do quickly. It's a beautiful looking website. This was created for me in less than 7 minutes from the prompts that you saw. So this is a very efficient way to do something through this use of agentic AI. But I said earlier, it's using the command line. It's something that may feel a little bit uncomfortable. So here's what the good news is. About 6 weeks ago, Claude launched a product that's designed to be easier to use for mere mortals. They're calling this Claude Cowork. It's essentially the same product, but Claude Code basically sent a signal that this is for coders only. This is for creating code. It's for a particular niche audience. Cowork sounds more approachable. This is your coworker. This is something that you can use to assist you. So it uses the same thing, but it's within an app now. So if you download the Claude app, you can access this directly. The way that you would do this is you're downloading the app and basically you're choosing between 3 things that the app does. Regular chat, which is what you've perhaps been used to in the past, code, which I showed on a couple of slides ago, and then the new cowork. So you can switch between those modes. You then provide folder access. So you are designating a directory, a folder on your computer that you're comfortable with the system manipulating. So obviously you wouldn't give it access to a folder that contains, financial records or student data, things that you want to keep private. You put it and give it access to a folder that you're comfortable doing so. But once you've done that, the system has read and write access to this folder. So here's another example of how this can be used. So here's the app. I'm putting in a prompt. I'm saying, I would like you to create a website that creates a word cloud for people putting in their New Year's resolutions. And again, within 7 minutes or so, it creates a live website that's running on my local machine. So I can just very simply upload this to my website. So it's several files in a folder, and this now exists as a system to use. So again, in the slides, there's a link there that shows you how this works. But you can refine these things. So this thing that I created in Cowork, I can say, okay, this is great. I like the way that this is working, but I want some changes to this. I want an admin backend so I can go in and I can manipulate things. And I also want a way that I can export the data to a PDF. And we provide that instruction. And again, a few minutes later, Claude Cowork creates code on my laptop, on my device, that I can upload. So this starts to become a very powerful thing to use. This is a way that we can automate some sort of tasks that are tedious. So here's an example of how you might do this. You're probably downloading lots of material as part of your research, as you plan to teach classes, as just part of your general sort of academic existence. So these folders of files exist on your device, and chances are you're like me. You download a lot of stuff, you don't really have that much time to go through it and to organize it. Well, we can ask Claude to organize. So here's a prompt. We're saying, okay, look at my stuff that I've downloaded, create a logical folder structure, organize it by academic sources, industry data, news and social media, and personal notes. Rename those files and include the main topic and date where identifiable. Then create a master index document listing all these files by categories. And then I can ask the system now, okay, look at everything I've downloaded, create a 5-slide PowerPoint presentation outline for digital transformation in Chicago retail with this information. So this is a really productive use of the system. So as I say, we're moving beyond copying and pasting. But let's take a step back. So there are some sort of legal and ethical considerations to be aware of here. We know that these systems sometimes hallucinate. There are ways that we can sort of mitigate the risk there, but we have legal obligations. So at my university, those legal obligations typically fall into FERPA and HIPAA. So there are laws that exist in the US that we need to be aware of, and we need to use technology in a way that doesn't break those laws. So at my university, we have from our IS team security recommendations, things that we can and cannot do. So this sometimes pushes us into particular platforms to use over others. So for some of you, this could be Copilot chat. And the reason for that is if you're a Microsoft shop, if you're paying money to Microsoft to use Office and all those other good things, it could be that Copilot chat is available to you to use free of charge. And what that does is if you're using that particular product, it protects and encrypts your data. So that means everything that you do on these systems isn't being used to train the models. And it provides a mostly secure environment, although there are potentially, issues to be aware of, in which you can do something and you can feel largely secure that you're doing the right thing. There are other products in this space. So one of the other sort of products that universities might start to consider are playgrounds. So playgrounds are ways that you can access multiple models through one interface. So Boodlebox is probably preeminent in this space. It's one of the products that many universities are gravitating towards because it's FERPA compliant and it's SOC 2 certified. Mental AI from IBL is a similar sort of product in the space. And then, maybe harder to use in the enterprise, but Poe provides this as well. Again, another sort of way that we can access multiple models simultaneously. But the thing that I recommend to my fellow faculty and my students is if we are using the free tools, look for ways that we can turn off model training. If we have to use those free tools, if they are the only things available to us, we have to be aware that they're sometimes learning from our conversations and the data that we upload. And there are sometimes a way that we can turn off aspects of this. So here for Anthropic Claude, Google Gemini, and then OpenAI ChatGPT are some methods that we can mitigate the risk. And then before we open things up to questions, here's a model that I think is very useful within academia. The issue is we want students to use generative AI or AI in ways that's useful to learning. But we need to provide a framework in terms of how they should use this and to what extent. Well, there's a thing called the AI assessment scale. This is a Creative Commons document that you can use in your teaching. And what I like about this is it provides a very easy to understand framework of how students can use AI in your classes. And it goes from no AI through to what's called AI exploration. And the thing that I like here is it's giving an appropriate framework that students can respond to. And at the higher level, where we're expecting students to use AI, there's two forms of that. Number four is full AI. We're basically saying, yep, use it in any way that is appropriate for this assessment, which is good. Five says the same thing, but says, since you're using these tools, I'm expecting you to create something that is better than normal, something that is moving the needle, something that is beyond what a typical human would be able to do unaided. We're looking for exemplary work. And from that, we want to make sure that our students are acknowledging the ways that they are using AI in their work and research and the ways in which they interact with you in the classroom. So what I make sure is if my students are doing something, there's an acknowledgement statement that goes with everything that they do. It doesn't have to be too complex. It could be something like this, where it's saying portions of sections 2 and 3 were drafted with the assistance of OpenAI's ChatGPT 4, used to generate initial outlines and paraphrase complex passages. The author verified all facts, revised the text for coherence, and takes full responsibility for the final content. So anyway, I'm very deliberately saved time for Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see people within Zoom. And this is the fun part of the session. This is where we all get to talk to each other. Are there questions I can answer in the moment? Things you want to share?
I guess I'll just share that I love that acknowledgement. I know it was at the very end, but I like that idea because I'm always trying to figure out what, like a lot of people are like, oh, they need to make sure they cite AI. And I'm like, okay, what does that look like? But I like that acknowledgement too. And I
And I
have
think
had students say, I'm using Grammarly. So I've at least had them acknowledge Grammarly in their assignments.
and I think it has to be simple. I'm really happy that you're doing this. The problem sometimes if we create something that's too complex, our students freak out. It's like, oh my God, I need to provide citations. I need to show this. I need to show that. It's like, no, just tell me what you used, how you used it. And the more important thing is you're not giving me AI slop. You're giving me something that you looked at and you made sure it's correct. So I'm super glad that's something that you're doing. So let's have a look. I'm in chat. I have no questions. I'm still processing. That is me too. Uh, every day feels like improv, you know, I'm processing the information. So since I don't think there are any questions at the moment, let me sort of reaffirm what's in the content I've shared with you. So you've got a link to the PDF handouts for this. There are some additional resources in there that I suggest you have a look at. I'm going to share my screen just to bring those up again for folks. So I would highly suggest that you start to develop your AI literacy. And here are some of the tools that I found to be really useful in the space. So back in 2018, Finland's government came to the decision that they needed to retool the workforce, that at least 1% of the population needed to have an understanding of artificial intelligence. So from this, they created a MOOC, so a massive online open course called Elements of AI. I think it's one of the best resources that explains how artificial intelligence operates. It takes a while to complete this, so maybe a couple of weekends. I think it's about 30 hours of content, although I did move through this more swiftly. It's a really good thing. It provides a certificate if you complete it. They then created a secondary MOOC in the space called Building AI. And what this does is it starts to get you to think about the ways in which code could be used to take these techniques and apply them to sort of the workspace. Again, a really good MOOC. But the thing that I think is most beneficial to educators is their third. Came out, I think, about a year and a half ago, called Ethics of AI. And this talks about how artificial intelligence is changing society, ways in which we need to be aware of how there are biases and limitations to these systems. And this, I think, is excellent. The thing that I love about these platforms is they've been localized. So they exist in about 50 different languages, but they're available free of charge to use, and they provide certificates when you complete them. So it's one of the best resources I found as educators start to think about artificial intelligence. Anyway, that is me done. I always make sure I finish before the end of the appointed time. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope this was useful to you. And best of luck in your teaching research using artificial intelligence.
Susan asked about sharing the link again.
Oh, yeah. Let me put that in chat. There we go. The link is yours. What I'm going to try and do, Bob, if you're able to give me like the recording of today or the transcript, I'll use AI to sort of put additional stuff on that page.
Ooh, sure, I'd be glad to do that. I'll give you the the link as soon as we're done today.
Yeah.
I upload it to our YouTube channel, but I'll be glad to send you
Oh,
the link right to it.
that works. Yeah. So one of the things I routinely do as an educator is every class I teach is recorded. I take the transcript, and then I use artificial intelligence to ask me what I could have done better, where students had issues with the
Oh,
questions. I'll put that prompt again on the website later today.
wow, that's a great use of AI.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I think
No, thank
not.
you.
So we survived Friday the 13th without systems crashing.
Yeah, James, as always, I thank you for uh, sharing great information. It's a good chance I'll reach out to you next year.
Excellent. Look forward to being here again. You guys take care. Enjoy the weekend.